It only took 2 weeks, but I finally got a badge set up that I'm comfortable with. It be like that sometimes in Paper Mario. Green interwebs, it's Jackie K. And welcome to another part of this build I have currently of Paper Mario Sweet Expedition. Last time we met up with Chai and got a little taste of her T-wielding action. And today I think it's time to put those skills to the test and maybe meet a new party member along the way. Maybe, like it hasn't been heavily foreshadowed, flat out told many times over. Oh hey, the enemies that appear on screen actually reflect what shows up in the battle. If only I could remember how I did that. You're probably already familiar with this fight if you've played the Game Jam build. The most major differences are the visuals you see on screen here before the fight, and I quote-unquote Cooper-proofed it. I believe I have it, so the fight automatically triggers before you can even get close enough to the enemies to use Cooper to get a first strike. As fun as it would be to get a first strike and get a little edge on these enemies, it is technically a boss fight, and more importantly, first striking the enemy screws up the music, which is a shame, but this is an important fight, so I thought it was important to give it some unique music to go along with it. I know this is the theme that plays at Yoshi Island, but doesn't it kind of feel like a battle theme to some degree? That's at least the mindset I had going in changing like this. Like, it's gonna jar some people because they're so used to hearing it as non-battle music, but at least until it gets to the slow part. But alas, I spent so much time rambling that we completely went over Goombario's tattles. Guess I'll just talk about these enemies as we go instead. As this could be your first major fight with Chai, it is built a lot around her abilities, between the bloopers being very susceptible to sleep, the piranha plants pretty much paralyzing you, and Chai being able to get you out of that pinch. Her abilities serve you quite well in this fight. Oh wait, is this going to be the moment? Apparently it is. I actually decided to use the Coco Kaboom. Now, a perfect test subject despite being flying. But I'm sure we'll find something to use as Dizzy effect, and if we don't, I'm definitely going to reevaluate the stat tables I have for all these, and make sure that there's at least something immune to Dizzy by the time you all get your hands on it. Gotta be honest with you, I don't quite agree with the decisions of past me there. I guess I just really want to show off Goombario's Nuclear Bonk. This is a pretty good fight to do it, because they have exactly 10 HP, and they can be pretty annoying to deal with if you don't just take them out in one hit. But I felt like that going for that instead of using Chai to get myself out of paralyzation did leave myself pretty open. Besides that though, I kind of see my logic. Keep them asleep until I'm ready to deal with them, focus on the piranha, and right before they wake up, just use a Nuclear Bonk. Doesn't matter that they heal because his attack will take care of them in a single hit. Wouldn't be surprised if I made some more changes just to the numbers if nothing else of Nuclear Bonk. It is technically stronger than doing Head Bonk 2 turns in a row, and yet something has not felt quite right about it ever since I added that secondary effect to it. On the subject of things not feeling quite right, I got the feeling that I don't have enough enemies that are susceptible to Dizzy. Maybe I just made a bunch of stuff immune to it, back when Cooper had an AoE effect that dizzied all enemies, including ones in the air. Cause I swear it can dizzy enemies. I have a video showcasing partner moves, and I'm pretty sure I have him dizzy an enemy in that video. Ah well, at least I have time to balance. See? Nuclear Bonk does pay off. Cause sure, I lose a partner's turn, but at least the enemy that can paralyze is completely out of the picture. Mario can handle this little blooper on his own, right? Okay, hindsight, I am a little feels bad that I can't finish this thing off in a single attack. Oh well, at least I know it can't heal off more damage than I've done. I'm confident enough with my timing on this command for that and that alone. And I guess the fact that, like, every time I've used Goombario's Nuclear Bonk, it hasn't felt like I've instantly won. Like, sure, I may have devastated that entire piranha plant, but it left me open. It didn't feel like do the attack and win. And I think that's at least a sign that I'm heading in the right direction when it comes to balancing out the move. I just can't get over how simultaneously better and yet simultaneously worse it is now compared to before. Yeah. Also, I don't think it should be dropping that beam, but hey, worse things could happen. For now, let's meet Rush. She's a pretty bold, adventurous type, and we've gotten a bit of foreshadowing of her spunky nature through the dialogue that we've seen up to this point. Now, this is a case of dialogue differing slightly depending on who the partner that's currently out is. If it's Cooper or Gumario, you get this more general text. But there is also a special set of dialogue if Chai is the partner that you finish this fight off with. As such, I'm going to swap over to Chai because personally I find it the better of the two dialogue. While the general text gives you a better idea of Rush's sense of adventure and her interest in enjoying with Mario, motivation and all, with Chai we see more character growth from Rush. We actually see her start to understand Chai's point of view and learn how to be more humble. Here we actually see her apologize for roping all of her friends into the situation they're currently in, and take responsibility for her actions. I guess you see bits of that growth in the general text, but it feels a lot more personal when she's saying it directly to Chai. She's growing as a character by Paper Mario 64 standards, and she's only going to grow stronger as she joins our party. And by golly, it's going to be a fun time having her in the party. Don't mind the art. It's completely just a mock-up, and I honestly completely forgot that I had it in there when recording this footage. I have a better attempt at the art for Rush and Chai, and if I remember to finish it before this video goes up, maybe I'll just post a couple screenshots of that in the Discord. I'm still really on the fence of whether to use custom artwork in general, because I know I can't mimic the Paper Mario art style as well as some people do, like the artist that made the art for Dark Star. But if I don't hold myself to make it look like the Paper Mario 64 art style, then I think maybe I could make decent art for a mod. At least for my mod. But then I also would have to come up with something for Cooper and Gumario because I completely forgot that their fanfare art is actually used on the character bio, and we can talk about this another time. I completely glossed over the part of where the game describes the party members, so it's up to me to describe it here. So the big draw of Rush is also the reason that there's so much of an emphasis on elemental weaknesses and resistances in Sweet Expedition. Being a Sugar Sparky, Rush is elementally adaptable. As is, her Glaze Dash is kinda weak. No weakness or resistance, but it does at least penetrate defense. The move gets real interesting in combination with Flavor Swap. This move not only changes the elemental property of Glaze Dash, it changes the way it behaves as well. Like we just saw there, Fire Glaze Dash actually is a multi-hit. It is affected by elemental strength and weaknesses of enemies, so if you know an enemy is weak to fire, you can capitalize on that to do even more damage than normal. Ice Glaze Dash is also interesting. When Rush attacks an enemy with ice, they get chilled out for the turn. If you're going up against a foe that you know will really hurt, this might be an option to consider, even if it's not the most optimum element to use against it. Let's see here, we were able to block all the damage from that guy, while the normal guy did 1 damage to us. If that heavy hitter is also weak to ice, all the more power to you. One thing of note, it does only last 1 turn, so there is still a purpose to an item that would have a more long-term effect like the Chili Doll. So those are the 3 elements that Rush has access to throughout the course of Sweet Expedition. Hopefully I get a chance to talk a little bit more about that later, but first, we have one more ability to show off with Rush, and I think we're finally at a moment that's good to do so. Gumball Gush is an ability Rush has that she didn't have in the Game Jam release of Sweet Expedition. It's what I wanted her to have for the Game Jam release instead of the Mini Ray, but I didn't have time to fully implement. And yeah, based on the sprite, it does behave exactly like you think it does, minus the fact that it's also affected by Rush's element. So it's not the strongest attack in Sweet Expedition, but it can fluctuate between a fire element and an ice element as you please. The biggest downside is that it does not penetrate defense even in Rush's default star state, but there will be a more appropriate time to dive into those details later. For now, we have some other Sugar Sparky kids to find. Actually, there is a little thing I want to show off before resuming that quest proper. This is the part of the marshlands we found Rush at. Certainly is a handful going this deep into them, but still, gotta give props for going there alone. Imagine if we had someone this tough fighting alongside us when we took on Bowser. We should study up on Rush's abilities, assuring we make the most of them. I didn't edit quite every tattle, but I did hit a few little Easter eggs like that in the tattles along the way. And yeah, that star piece location is the same from Vanilla. Funny thing, it's harder than you would think to actually edit scripts that are tied to items that come off trees. Maybe there's just something obvious I'm overlooking, but there's a few cases I tried to mess around with and didn't have that much success. But I suppose there's time to try to figure that out still. Anyways, I think I wanted to show this fight just to showcase the Bee's weakness? The Bonzom. How did I forget an iconic name like that? But I think instead I accidentally showed off the resistance that the Cafe Fuzzy had. My bad. Not only I don't think I've ever actually said the names of these enemies out loud. It's been a bit since I last worked on Sweet Expedition, at least since I started recording the commentary for this particular video. I've actually been busy trying to keep up with the post-commentary for these videos to assure that I can keep releasing them on a bi-weekly basis. Also, I've been trying to get a little bit back into Donjin, so yeah, there is that too. So part of the reason that, for me in particular, I wanted to go get Rush first before saving the other Sugar Sparky kids, they actually have unique dialogue if Rush is your partner out. Similar to how with the Ocean Kids, there's actually unique dialogue depending on if Sushi's out as your party member or one of the other party members. The same applies if the Sparky Kids are talking to Shy. And since I have seen the code of how it makes that differentiation of which set of dialogue to pull up, I decided to go an extra step and add in a little thing for Rush as well. They are two party members tied to the island, so I felt it only made sense to have unique dialogue for each of them. Maybe with how much is going on in the dialogue and the battles compared to, you know, the textures in the backgrounds, it might be a little apparent where my interest in Paper Mario modding lies. So yeah, with Rush out, the Sparky had no qualms just calling out Rush right away for putting them on quote-unquote boring scouting duty. With Chai out here, it's a little less indirect and a little more personal talking to Chai directly. Also, I guess it's a good time to mention that with each of the Sugar Sparkies that you save, they give you a little item. It's kind of... Oh yeah, that jump cut caught me off guard a bit. But as I was saying, I tried to make the whole rescue the kids thing a little more interesting by adding a little Metroidvania element to it, where you get different items that you can use in battles based on what order you rescue them in. So I feel it adds more depth and more personalization to an individual playthrough. I wouldn't quite call it replayability, but something to make one person's playthrough a little different from another's. And who knows, with each item having its own unique ability, maybe there's some potential to create like optimal routes or something. I don't know if it'd be that much, but it'd be kind of cool if just anything to add a little more depth to this whole segment that's kind of infamous in the community. While we're so close back to the village though, let's take a little time to check up on the villagers and see how they're doing. Since the dialogue does change in between rescuing none of them and all of them. I forget the exact numbers, but there's a few little things like that, and since I had to remake the text, I had to keep all that stuff in mind. Huh, something feels a little off there. Oh sure, twin sister. I guess that's one way to get around the coding of the game. Back during the Game Day's release, I didn't really know how to remove NPCs, so I decided just to write around it. Though at this point I find it kinda cute, so even though I could probably just make it so the NPC doesn't appear back in the village after you rescue them, I'm not sure if I want to. I guess there's time to ponder what I can do about it though. If you're incredibly curious, I do plan to show off all the NPC dialogue after all the parts go up in that uncommentated full extended version video I keep teasing. For now though, I wanted to talk to these two Yoshis in particular because they have a little bit of flavor text that kind of tie... They act like mini tutorials of Russian Chai's abilities. Not to the point where you're completely clueless if you don't talk to them, but it gives a reason to talk to them. Plus this little rumor about Sugar Sparkies having their star power change when they get stronger. If you don't remember, star power is the default ability for Rush. Maybe we'll find more about that later. Oh yeah, some of you may remember the rock candies from the Game Jam release. They're not completely gone. Remember when I was saying before how I'm really bad at changing stuff in trees? Very classic example of that, because like, the single tree, I guess I was able to change into what the game thinks are mushrooms. That's how I do the cocoa beans. Like, I rewrote the mushroom and just replace every single tree with dropping a mushroom. The reason that tree is still the same is because the script gets a little more complicated when it drops multiple things, like how that dropped the star piece first and then drops the coconut as per usual. Hence the rock candy being born as a way to replace the coconut with something more on theme. And no need to fear, I already have ideas of how to design the rock candy to look a little more personal. I guess not generic is the word I was looking for. Perhaps you'll see that in action soon enough. So with one Sparky Kid and Rush in tow, I believe that leaves us with only like 3 more to go. So as we make our way back to it, I suppose now it's good a time as any to really play around with Rush's abilities, especially in the ice form. It's been a while since we last tattled these guys, so you may not remember that they have a weakness to ice. That in combination with the attack drop, I'm just gonna say that it's a nice little bonus to have on top of everything, because they're not the most devastating attackers in the game. We're going up against the most devastating attacker in the same fight. At least from normal enemy standpoints. It's just neat, and that's the whole fun of Sweet Expedition, just playing around with Rush's various elemental abilities and see what secondary effects work out against which sort of foes. For example, if we were to like use Rush... Well, we were still rescuing Rush, so I guess we couldn't use them in the blooper fight, but maybe against like the Fuzzies to reduce the amount of HP that they recover, capitalize on the weakness that the plant enemies have to fire to do even more damage with the double attack than they would on an enemy that doesn't resist or is weak to it. And in combination with Chai and her sleeping abilities, and especially an ability that we'll get for her later on, there's a lot of room for experimentation and fun combinations, at least for a little old mod like this. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of time to talk about all that once we actually get into some more battles. And don't mind the cut. I think there's some random tattles that I snuck in, stuff like that. Figure y'all didn't need to see it now, and if you really want to see it, well, that's what the full uncommentated video is for. That being said, we rescued our 3rd Sugar Sparky. Don't forget that Rush actually counts as one of them. And here we have another example of branching dialogue. We see the little Sugar Sparky spewing out to Chai just how much of a mess she made out of things. If you were to do these with Goombario or Cooper as your partner, you wouldn't really see that. You would just see how just ambitious and rambunctious Rush is as a character. Before I go into that, a quick little showcase of the Spell Donut. It's essentially a cookie that's a bit nerfed. It doesn't really heal as much as it did in Vanilla Paper Mario, but you still got the crazy secondary effect of randomly giving you one of the 3 statuses on Mario. Considering it's the only item you get in Sweet Expedition that gives you invisibility, there's a potential for some fun shenanigans with it. Anyways, as we're seeing here, when Rush is our party member, We see a little bit of character development from Rush, even though she doesn't actually say anything. The point being is, like, this little Sugar Sparky is worried that Rush was just gonna get mad at them for screwing everything else, and it's like, no, Rush is the one that feels like she screwed everything up. It's not your fault, little Sugar Sparky. Character development. You gotta squeeze it in, even in these little simple projects every now and then. And yeah, I guess we'll pick up the Candy Star while we're here. I've been experimenting around trying to find fun, creative ways to actually make use out of Sushi, or in this case Chai's, swimming abilities. It's kind of basic, so it's kind of tricky to come up with anything to work. I had some ideas, but I was playtesting around with it the last time I sat down on Sweet Expedition, and nothing really panned out. Like, I tried to make, like, P-switches that you could hit in the water, and the problem is that the switches have gravity, so Chai doesn't get low enough in the water to grab them. Wait a minute, why did I... Oh, I know what's going on. We could go over there, but since that's a pretty big fight, I think it's about time we actually get that super block. And despite my valiant efforts otherwise, it looks like we're gonna get into this fight after all. Apparently this is the first time we're coming across this enemy though, the Sour Drop Beetle. So now's a good time to figure it out. And yeah, we actually have enemies that are weak to Quake in Sweet Expedition. Shame I don't have a Quake ability on hand. I'm sure we'll alleviate that in the future, though. Still pretty proud of that little line of dialogue. If I had to leave any flavor text from Gubario's title between the Game Jam release and now, I definitely had to keep that line at the very least. Oh hey, none of the Minty guys have their spear pointed up. I can't believe we actually got a capital opportunity to use multi-bounce, even over the Power Quake. I mean, I guess Power Quake would have done the same thing but more power, but what you gonna do? The point is, we attack all of them, we flipped over the Beetle at the same time. This seems like a perfect time to make use out of Rush's abilities. Cause, you may notice in Gubario's tail, they do have a weakness, but we do have to flip them over in order to really capitalize on that weakness. Or should I say, a weakness besides Quake. That was the thing in the... I might be getting the Game Jam title mixed up with the original release, but even if it's not there in the title, their weakness to fire when flipped over still stands. That being said, maybe it's still better going for ice, because there's two Minty guys weak to ice, and then there was one Sour Drop Beetle that's weak to fire, but Mario could just flip it every turn if it so pleases. And it all works out in the end, I suppose. More importantly though, the path between us and the super block has now been cleared. And since we have Shy and Rush, we have a little bit of freedom of which one to upgrade. There is only one super block, so it is an important decision to make. With this you can upgrade one of your party members. And that's a big reason why you start out with the Ultra Stone, because we can get Rush or Shy up to Ultra Rank right away. Rush gets to learn Triple Zest, and Shy learns Toxic Tea. It's a bit of a tough choice, at least for showcasing purposes, because they're both fairly unique. But I think we'll go with Rush. I think that's what the people are more interested in with her elemental manipulation abilities. You may saw from the description, it does 3 elemental attacks, which definitely something unique for a Paper Mario game. And certainly was an interesting challenge to try to balance. More importantly though, I can think of the perfect opportunity to try it out. Got a crying little Sugar Sparky up in the distance. Don't mind the fact that it sounds completely like Yoshi. Have you ever heard a Sugar Sparky cry? Have you heard a Sparky cry in general? It's not important because if we're not careful, this boss fight is going to make us cry. It's the rematch against the enemy that we ran from at the very beginning of the adventure. Sugar Bee Rush. It has 25 HP, 4 attack power, and it's extra weak to fire. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that in the final release. It might be better to like make one plant enemy weak to ice and another plant enemy weak to fire. But for now, the biggest thing to differentiate the ambushes from the heart plants is the fact that the heart plant, even though they're both weak to fire, the ambush-like enemies are extra weak to fire in exchange for not being weak to ice. Meanwhile, the other plant enemies are always weak to ice. So the secret to getting this fight to a manageable boss fight rather than an overwhelming boss fight is to get rid of those bees in the first turn. Invigorate plus multi-bounce is a keen strategy as always, but in addition you can also use Rush's ability. Part of the reason why it's recommended to wait until the kids go missing to take this on is because at that point you should have access to both Rush or at the very least Chai, the latter who can take care of this poison situation and avoid it from getting too out of hand. Granted, there are items that you can use instead, so again, this fight is perfectly possible to do right at the start. I just don't think I'll let it be possible to do right away, just to avoid people getting the wrong impression about the difficulty of the mod by accidentally stumbling upon this first. And I guess technically it's more of a mini-boss fight than an actual boss fight. Part of the reason why I didn't change the music, but now that I think more about it, definitely something I gotta remember to do before finally releasing it. At least change this fight to a mini-boss theme. It shouldn't be too hard, right? Also, take another sip for trying to make use of the dizzy effect of that item and screwing it up completely. Once we get the boss down to just a sugar bee rush, then this fight becomes a lot more manageable and it becomes more practical to use Goombario's nuclear bonk. I guess one way to make Goombario's nuclear bonk a bit of a perk is to wait until it's right at the HP level that Goombario's attack would normally do, then you use nuclear bonk, battle ends, and you don't have to suffer the secondary effect of losing out on a turn. It's also part of the reason that makes the move pretty tricky to balance. But alas, I went on that tangent already. Also, the whole concept of using Goombario's nuclear bonk to finish it off, if you went the route that I did and actually upgraded Rush, alternatively, if you upgraded Rush to the Ultra Rank, you could try her ability out in this fight instead. It is a strong attack. The one downside of Rush's ability versus Goombario's nuclear bonk is that nuclear bonk, you don't really have to worry about elemental damage. It does technically do explosion damage, but not enough enemies actually have explosion resistance to actually mine. Only one that comes to mind is the Sour Drop Beetle that we saw earlier, but nuclear bonk also counts as jump damage, so even though they're extra resistant to explosion, Goombario's nuclear bonk isn't as devastated by it as you might think. Rush's triple assess does the second most damage out of any ability, but the exact amount depends a lot on enemy weaknesses and resistances. But you don't have to worry about that drawback that Goombario's nuclear bonk has as a result. So I guess overall, Goombario's a good finisher. Rush might be good for raw damage overall, but I'm sure we'll find more battles in the future where I can actually show off triple assess, and it'll become more apparent by then. Now, this one I show off twice, not necessarily because I'm showing off this branching pass. You've already seen it in action already. However, I did want to show off that this Sugar Sparky gives us a fire pop, which I won't be using in Sweet Expedition. You see, I wanted to use this opportunity to show off something extra that I added into the mod. Something that came up in the Game Jam release. Of what if you have a full inventory when they give you an item? Well, you get that dialogue instead. It also happens with Colorado and the Lightroom now. But in the case of Colorado, if you have too many items, he'll just hold on to it until the next time you talk to him, and then actually give you the life stream proper. This is supposed to be the case with the Sugar Sparkies as well, but it's a little more complicated because there's a whole bunch of NPCs in a single branch. So this is part of playtesting of that, and I found out that it didn't work exactly what I planned. But in the final release, I do plan on making it so if you do happen to talk to one of the Sugar Sparkies when you're full on items, you can just pick up the item later. So I believe we only have one Sugar Sparky left to rescue, and therefore one normal enemy encounter made more difficult than usual to act as a mini-boss along the way. Since this one is technically optional with some tricky maneuver, I don't think I'm gonna like add mini-boss music to it or anything like that, but it's certainly a fight if you want to get into it. And once you know what to do, it's not the worst fight in the world. Going into it with like 2 FP may not have been the greatest idea I've ever had though. Let's see how I get myself out of the situation. Yeah. Worst part is I probably had plenty of opportunities to heal up, and I just didn't think about it. Well, that's why I felt it was justified to add a save block right before this fight. But it looks like I'm gonna have to resort to using, oh my god, I just noticed the star point counter and the coin counter. That's just incredibly nice. I doubt we'll ever see an opportunity, something like that ever pop up in Paper Mario ever again. Some of the best moments in life are the accidental ones, and you always gotta appreciate the little things in life. Alright. After much thought, I think I'm gonna start off with going for an Ice Gumball Rush. Yep, indeed, that's the actual weakness of the bee enemies, the Buzz Bonds. The problem is I haven't seen their name in years because I always go for AoE attacks, so I'm not going to remember what their name exactly is until I actually see it in front of my face. I just know it's like Buzz Bond or something like that. So, with everything else out of the way and that one enemy being completely vulnerable, I guess this is the moment I decided to show off Triple Zest. You mash the buttons, and depending on how well you do, depends on how much damage it does. You saw it was weak to fire, so it did 4 damage with the fire attack instead of just 3. But typically if you get the action command correct, and there's no weakness and resistance to worry about, it does 3 fire damage, 3 electric damage, 3 ice damage. I forget if that's the exact order, but case still stands. So it does a solid 9 damage by itself. If you find something that's weak to a bunch of things though, there's definitely the potential of it doing much more. And you can see back when Nuclear Bonk was only 10 damage, it was a little bit more apparent that there's going to be some situations Triple Zest is your strongest option, and some options where Nuclear Bonk is the strongest option. I guess to some degree that's still the same because it's like 13 damage over 2 turns, when you could use Rush's attack twice to do like 18 damage in 1 turn, minus the resistances, and assuming you have the FP to afford. If you played Paper Mario Dark Star, that move made like a little familiar. And yeah, that's no mere coincidence. Essentially I built off the code that Shadeblade used to make Mega Bolt in Dark Star to make Triple Zest. Wasn't quite as simple as copying and pasting the code and running off from there, but I did get it to work, and I couldn't be happier that I did, because it definitely feels like one of the more creative things I've done in Paper Mario modding. So hey, let's meet up with the one Sugar Sparky that can't light things up. Oh geez, it certainly is convenient for me that we still need someone to light up the place in order to progress this scene. Otherwise, it might be really apparent that all I really did was replace Yoshi Kid sprites with Plot Sprite with a little bit of editing. Talk about lucky. Speaking of Shock Pop, more on that a little later. For now, I want to talk a little bit about something else I added to Sweet Expedition. Be sure to let the village leader know everything's fine. And the game gives you a convenient option to warp back to town without going through all the backtracking of getting back there yourself. Initially, one of the many things I did to try to shorten the length of this game as much as possible, but since that's not an issue anymore, I made the scene optional and it doesn't warp you by default. Though, if I knew how to do that in the first place, I would have just done that in the Game Jam release. I've learned a lot since making Sweet Expedition. I guess it goes no surprise, it's the first Paper Mario mod I did, so pretty much have to learn everything I do for this from working on it. So, if you couldn't guess already, Rush's entire existence is pretty much a large snowball effect that revolved around the concept that, hey, you need Watt in order to actually progress through this chapter in Vanilla Paper Mario. Yeah, the entire existence of these Sugar Sparkies was a very convoluted way to get around all that without just plastering Watt into the starting party roster like Goombario and Kooper. With the two, like with Kooper, it makes sense because Kooper joined Colorado after Paper Mario, so he's part of the expedition. Goombario is a little bit more forced, but it's like, Goombario's a big Mario fan, so why would he pass up an excuse to travel with Mario again? He also needs the ability to swim, but that's not too much of an issue because Sushi's already built into the map. Her whole scene of joining your party and all that is already in the code, so just retool Sushi into a new party member and voila, Chai was born. Working around the fact that that Dark Cave needed Watt was a bit more tricky, because sure, I could have just added Watt to the starting party like I did with Goombario and Kooper, but somewhere down the line, I thought it'd be much more interesting to actually just make a second party member that you meet on the adventure. And trust me, that took a lot of work, a lot of brainstorming, and a lot of questions with other members of the Paper Mario modding community. That's a lot. It was a lot to do for my first mod ever, but eventually I figured it out and kind of made the mod a lot more special as a result. So even though it took up the majority of the game jam and things probably wouldn't have been Rush if I just didn't make Rush, I just noticed the pun. In the end, it ended up working for the best because I created a unique party member as a result. Because sure, you could just randomly have Watt show up out of the blue, but how do you make it fit into a food theme? Because remember, Sweet Expedition wasn't made for a game jam that had a particular theme. Food was a vague theme, and vague on purpose, but still. How do I make a Watt-like character fit into the whole theme of Sweet Expedition? And that's where the concept of Sugar Sparkies were born. Just like, well, it's already an island of candy and sweets, so why not just have inhabitants that revolve around? And that's how the whole element swap theme was born, because trying to make a moveset that kind of fit into that theme, I came up with the idea of flavor swap. She's changing her attributes as she changes her flavor, and that's how the whole concept of changing the elemental damage she does, as well as secondary effects, came around. Okay, I'm cutting this video longer than intended anyways, but I felt that was really important to get out. So next time on Paper Mario Sweet Expedition, we'll talk to the village elder proper, and progress to the final third of our adventure. Until then, see y'all later. Take care.